There comes a moment in life when you finally become tired, not tired of loving, not tired of caring, but tired of standing at a door that never opens for you. And perhaps the hardest part is that nobody tells you when that moment has arrived. You simply begin to notice that you are always the one reaching out, always the one explaining, always the one wondering what went wrong. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for the sentence that changed everything, the moment when their warmth became distance. And somewhere inside that endless searching, you forget the most important question. Why are you working so hard to be chosen by someone who has already shown you that they are not choosing you? You see, my friend, there is a strange kind of pain that comes from being almost loved. It is not the clean pain of goodbye. Goodbye gives you an ending. Almost love gives you questions. A message that arrives just when you begin to let go. A little attention after days of silence. A warm conversation followed by emotional distance. Enough affection to keep your hope alive, but never enough commitment to give your heart peace. And because the human mind hates unfinished stories, you keep returning to the same person, believing that perhaps the next conversation will finally explain everything. But sometimes the unanswered question is the answer. Sometimes the silence is not hiding a deeper love. Sometimes the silence is simply silence. Now, listen carefully, because this is where your life can begin to change. You cannot build a peaceful life around the possibility that somebody might eventually recognize your value. You cannot spend your mornings checking whether they replied, your afternoons wondering what they meant, and your nights imagining what could have been. That is not love anymore. That is emotional captivity. And emotional captivity can disguise itself as loyalty because you tell yourself, I don't give up on people. But there is a difference between refusing to give up on someone and refusing to give up on an illusion. One is loyalty. The other is self-abandonment. There are people you keep chasing, not because they are extraordinary, but because they awaken something inside you that you desperately wanted to feel. Maybe they made you feel interesting again. Maybe they gave you attention during a lonely season. Maybe for a brief period, they looked at you in a way that made you believe you had finally found someone who understood you. And when that feeling disappeared, you didn't just miss them. You missed the version of yourself that existed around them. That is why letting go can feel like losing a piece of your identity. You are not only grieving a person, you are grieving a possibility, a fantasy, a future you quietly designed in your mind. And human beings have a remarkable ability to turn uncertainty into obsession. When someone is consistently loving, your nervous system can relax. But when someone becomes unpredictable, your mind begins searching for patterns. Why did they respond yesterday, but not today? Why were they affectionate last week and distant this week? Why do they watch your stories, but never ask how you are? Why do they disappear and then suddenly return? And every tiny signal becomes evidence in a case you are secretly trying to win. You become a detective in a relationship that should have required nothing more complicated than mutual effort. You call it chemistry. Sometimes it is anxiety. You call it a deep connection. Sometimes it is emotional unpredictability. You call it intuition telling you they secretly care. Sometimes it is your wounded heart refusing to accept what your eyes have already seen. This does not mean your feelings are fake. Your feelings are real. But real feelings do not automatically create a healthy relationship. You can genuinely love someone who is genuinely wrong for your life. You can deeply care about someone who does not have the capacity, desire, courage, or willingness to meet you where you are. And accepting that truth is not bitterness. It is maturity. There is another truth you must understand. People do not always reject you because you are not enough. Sometimes they simply do not choose you. And those are two completely different things. Your mind may interpret their decision as a verdict on your worth, but it isn't. Someone's inability to love you properly does not reduce your value. Someone else's preference does not become your identity. Someone walking away does not prove that you were unworthy of being held. It only proves that the direction of their life was different from the direction of yours. Think about how much energy you have spent trying to become more desirable to one particular person. You changed your tone. You became more available. You tried to be less needy, then more interesting, then more mysterious. You waited before responding so you wouldn't seem too eager. You posted something hoping they would notice. You disappeared hoping they would miss you. You became a strategist when what you really wanted was to be loved. And there is something heartbreaking about that, because somewhere along the way, you stopped asking, is this person good for me? And started asking, what do I have to become so they will want me? That question will destroy your peace if you let it. Because once you make another person's approval the measurement of your worth, you become permanently dependent on their behavior. When they praise you, you feel valuable. When they ignore you, you feel invisible. When they come closer, you feel chosen. When they pull away, you feel abandoned. Your emotional state becomes a remote control in someone else's hands. And my friend, you were not placed on this earth to surrender control of your inner life to somebody who cannot even decide whether they want to be part of your outer life. Real confidence is quieter than that. Real confidence does not announce, you will regret losing me. Real confidence does not need revenge, jealousy, or dramatic exits. Real confidence simply says, I wish you well, but I will not continue abandoning myself to keep you. That is a powerful sentence because it does not come from anger. It comes from self-respect. It does not require them to understand. It does not require them to apologize. It does not require them to come running back. It is the moment you stop negotiating with reality. And perhaps you need to hear this today. Stop confusing potential with character. You may see who this person could become. You may see their kindness underneath their fear. You may see the wounded child beneath their emotional distance. You may understand their past, their abandonment wounds, their fear of vulnerability, their difficulty trusting people. And compassion is beautiful. But understanding someone's wounds does not obligate you to become their treatment plan. You can understand why someone behaves the way they do and still decide that their behavior is not acceptable for your life. There is a difference between compassion and self-sacrifice. Compassion says, I understand your pain. Self-sacrifice says, because I understand your pain, I will allow you to create pain in me indefinitely. No, that is not wisdom. You can love someone and establish a boundary. You can forgive someone and walk away. You can wish someone healing without volunteering to be wounded by them again. You can hold no hatred in your heart while still closing the door. In fact, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop participating in a pattern that keeps both people emotionally immature. You know what happens when you finally stop chasing? At first, it can feel like silence, terrifying silence. You reach for your phone and there is no reason to check it. You experience a beautiful moment and realize there is nobody you need to tell. You wake up and for a few seconds you forget. Then the memory returns. You feel the ache. You wonder whether they noticed your absence. You wonder whether they are thinking about you. You wonder if you made a mistake. This is the withdrawal stage of emotional attachment. Your mind is adjusting to the absence of a stimulus it became accustomed to. Do not mistake withdrawal for destiny. Just because you miss someone does not mean you should return to them. Missing someone is not evidence that they belong in your future. Sometimes you miss people who were unhealthy for you simply because your heart remembers the good moments more loudly than the painful ones. Your mind photographs the laughter and edits out the anxiety. It remembers the embrace and forgets the waiting. It remembers the message that made your heart race and forgets the 100 messages you never received. Healing begins when you stop editing the story. Remember the whole story. Remember the whole story. Remember how often you felt confused Remember how many times you questioned your worth. Remember the nights you couldn't sleep because you were trying to understand someone's silence. Remember how often you accepted crumbs because you were afraid that asking for the whole meal would make them leave. Remember how you lowered your expectations until almost anything felt like affection. And then ask yourself something very simple. If someone I loved told me they were living this exact relationship, would I tell them to keep chasing? Most likely, you would tell them to stop. You would tell them they deserve someone who is certain. You would tell them that love should not require constant interpretation. You would tell them that they should not have to beg for basic communication, consistency, respect, or emotional presence. But when it is your own heart, suddenly you create exceptions. You say, but they are different. You say, they have been through a lot. You say, maybe they are scared. You say, maybe the timing is wrong. And maybe all of those things are true. But a reason can explain behavior without excusing its effect on you. This is where emotional maturity begins. You stop asking only, why are they doing this? And begin asking, what is this doing to me? That second question is revolutionary because you can spend years studying another person's psychology while completely neglecting your own. You can understand their childhood, their attachment style, their fears, their personality, their trauma, their communication patterns, and still remain trapped. Knowledge about them does not save you. Awareness of yourself does. Perhaps the deeper wound is not that they did not choose you. Perhaps the deeper wound is that you have spent years believing you must earn love. Somewhere along the road, you learned that affection comes after achievement. Be useful, be attractive, be successful, be agreeable, never be too demanding, never express too much, never reveal too much vulnerability, never make them uncomfortable. Become everything they want, and perhaps they will stay. But love built on performance is exhausting because you are always acting for an audience. And when you stop performing, you discover something beautiful. The right people do not require you to audition endlessly. They may not agree with everything you say. They may not understand every part of you. They may even challenge you. But you do not have to constantly prove your right to exist in their world. There is a steadiness there, a sense of emotional safety. You are not constantly wondering where you stand because their actions give you an answer. You are not forced to decode every sentence. Their consistency speaks louder than their occasional affection. Now, let me tell you something about silence. Silence is powerful when it comes from peace. It is destructive when it comes from manipulation. There is a difference between stepping back because you have decided to protect your energy and disappearing because you want someone to panic and chase you. The first is maturity. The second is another form of attachment. If you stop contacting someone only because you hope their fear of losing you will finally activate their desire, then you have not truly let go. You are still chasing, just from a distance. True detachment is different. You no longer need a reaction. You do not need them to notice your absence. You do not need them to regret their decision. You do not need them to return so you can reject them and finally feel powerful. You do not need to prove that you were valuable after they failed to recognize it. You simply move forward, quietly, gracefully, without needing to turn your healing into a performance. And that is where something inside you begins to change. You become less impressed by intensity and more attracted to consistency. You stop confusing butterflies with compatibility. You stop believing that emotional chaos is evidence of passion. You begin to appreciate the person who calls when they say they will call. The person who communicates when something is wrong. The person who does not make you compete for their attention. The person who does not disappear whenever intimacy becomes uncomfortable. Suddenly, what once seemed boring begins to look like peace. You see, maturity changes your taste. When you are wounded, you may crave what is familiar even when familiar is painful. When you heal, You begin craving what is healthy, even when healthy initially feels unfamiliar. If you have spent years around emotional unpredictability, consistency can feel strange. You may even mistake peace for a lack of chemistry, because your nervous system was trained to associate love with uncertainty. That is why healing is not merely getting over a person. It is teaching your mind and body that love does not have to hurt in order to feel real. And there is something else you must release. The fantasy that one perfect conversation will fix everything. You imagine sitting across from them while they finally explain why they pulled away. They confess that they were scared. They tell you they secretly loved you all along. They apologize for everything. You cry. They cry. And suddenly, the entire painful story becomes meaningful. But life rarely gives us such cinematic closure. Sometimes you have to create your own closure without receiving the explanation you wanted. Closures is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes closure is the moment you stop asking the same question. It is when you say, I may never know exactly why they did what they did, but I know how I felt. I know what I experienced. I know what I deserve going forward. That is enough. You do not need every missing piece of the puzzle to decide that you no longer want to live inside the picture. So if someone does not choose you, believe them, not because you are angry, not because you want to punish them. Believe them because you respect reality. If they repeatedly show you that they cannot meet you, stop trying to convince them that they should. If they keep you in uncertainty, stop building your future around their potential. If they only return when they feel lonely, stop confusing their loneliness with love. If they only value you when you are leaving, recognize that fear of loss is not the same as the capacity to love. And if they come back someday, remember this. Returning is not the same as changing. A person can miss your presence without prepare the responsibility of loving you. They can regret losing access to you without becoming capable of giving you what you needed. They can say all the right words because they feel the consequences of your absence. So do not listen only to what they say when they return. Watch what they consistently do after the emotions settle. Your heart deserves evidence, not promises. Your peace deserves consistency, not occasional intensity. Your future deserves someone who chooses you in ordinary moments, not merely someone who fears losing you during dramatic ones. Love is not proven by how desperately someone holds you when you are walking away. It is proven by how carefully they treat you when they believe you are staying. And perhaps this is the part that hurts the most. Sometimes you have to accept that the person you wanted is not the person you needed. The chemistry was real. The memories were real. The attraction was real. The love may have been real, but real does not always mean right. Some people enter your life to reveal a wound you didn't know you had. Some reveal how badly you have been settling. Some teach you what you will never tolerate again. And some teach you that losing someone can become the beginning of finding yourself. So do not curse the season that broke you. Study it. Ask what it revealed. What did you tolerate because you were afraid to be alone? What did you overlook because you wanted the story to work? Where did you abandon your boundaries? Where did you ignore your intuition because you preferred the fantasy? Where did you confuse being needed with being loved? These questions may hurt, but they are productive pain. They turn suffering into wisdom. Your shadow deserves attention too. Maybe you chase because being rejected confirms an old belief that you are not enough. Maybe you become obsessed because uncertainty makes you feel that if you can finally win this person's love, you will prove something to yourself. Maybe you are not actually trying to get them back. Maybe you are trying to repair an older wound through a newer relationship. And that is why no amount of attention from this particular person will ever be enough, because the wound is older than them. You cannot heal abandonment by convincing someone not to abandon you. You heal it by refusing to abandon yourself. You heal it by staying when you are lonely, by honoring your boundaries when you are afraid, by telling yourself the truth when fantasy feels more comfortable, by choosing your dignity even when your heart is begging for one more message, by learning that being alone for a season is far less painful than being emotionally alone beside someone. There will come a morning when you realize you haven't checked their profile in days. You will hear a song that once destroyed you, and it will simply be a song. You will pass a place where you once waited for them, and instead of remembering what you lost, you will remember who you became. The memories may never disappear completely. They simply lose their authority over you. That is healing. Not forgetting, but remembering without being controlled. And one day you will understand why it had to end. Not because the person was evil. Not because you were perfect, but because your life could not grow around something that required you to remain emotionally small. You were spending too much energy trying to keep a connection alive, and life was asking you to build something larger. Your attention is one of your greatest assets. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Stop investing it where there is no return. Invest it in your character. Invest it in your work. Invest it in your health, your relationships, your faith, your learning, your purpose. Build a life so rich in meaning that another person's decision no longer determines whether you feel valuable. This does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming whole. You can have a soft heart and strong boundaries. Things. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can remain compassionate without remaining available to every person who knows how to trigger your emotions. And perhaps the greatest freedom is realizing that you do not need everyone to choose you. You only need to stop choosing people who repeatedly choose against you. That is the turning point. The world becomes different when you stop asking, how can I make them stay? And start asking, does their presence support the person I am becoming? That question will eliminate many relationships that were built on chemistry, but not character. You are allowed to outgrow people you once begged to stay. You are allowed to become unavailable for conversations that used to consume your entire night. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Cess. You are allowed to leave a relationship without proving that the other person was wrong. You are allowed to choose peace without making anyone a villain. And you are allowed to walk away even while a part of you still loves them. Because courage is not always the absence of love. Sometimes courage is loving someone and still saying, this is not enough for the life I am trying to build. That sentence requires strength. It requires you to tolerate the temporary pain of separation rather than the permanent pain of self-betrayal. It requires you to trust that an empty space can eventually become a doorway. So stop chasing, not because you have stopped caring, but because you have finally started caring about yourself too. Stop chasing the reply. Stop chasing the explanation. Stop chasing the person who only notices your value when you withdraw it. Stop chasing the fantasy that someday they will become exactly who you needed them to be. Let them be who they have chosen to be. And then you choose who you are going to become. You are not here to convince somebody of your worth. You are here to develop it, protect it, live from it, lies in the small things, and share it with people capable of appreciating it. The right relationship will not require you to shrink yourself to keep it alive. The right people will not make you wonder whether your existence matters to them. They may make mistakes. They may disappoint you. They may have fears. But there will be a willingness to repair, communicate, grow, and choose each other again. And if right now you are sitting in silence after someone walked away, let the silence be useful. Do not fill it immediately with another person. Do not run toward distraction. Sit with yourself. Let yourself grieve. Let yourself cry if you need to. Let the memories come and go without turning them into instructions. You are not weak because you miss them. You are human, but you become stronger each time you miss them and still choose not to return to what was destroying your peace. One day, you will look back at the version of yourself who kept chasing. And you will not be ashamed of that person. You will understand them. They were trying to be loved. They were trying to hold on to hope. They were afraid that letting go meant admitting they had wasted their time. But time spent learning yourself is never wasted. Lies in the small things. And the moment you stop chasing someone else's approval can become the moment you finally begin chasing your own potential. There is a life waiting for you beyond this attachment. There are conversations you haven't had, places you haven't seen, work you haven't created, people you haven't met, dreams you haven't built. Do not let one person's inability to recognize your value become the reason you never discover the full extent of it yourself. Sometimes the door you are desperately trying to open is the very door blocking you from the road you were meant to walk. So breathe. Let them go. Not dramatically, not bitterly, not with hate.